The morning sun was still soft, painting the quiet parking lot in a gentle gold. For the woman, this trip to the big grocery store was part of the weekly map of her life. A life that was now built on calm and predictable routines. She moved with a quiet efficiency, her short, practical hair tucked behind her ears. Her son, a boy of about 8 with eyes that noticed everything, walked beside her, his small hand lightly touching the cart. They didn't talk much, but they didn't need to. A look, a small nod, that was enough. She would point to an apple, and he would carefully put it in a bag. He would look at the cereal boxes, and she would wait, giving him time to choose. This was their rhythm. It was peaceful. Her eyes, a steady and watchful gray, scanned the area without seeming to. It was a habit she couldn't switch off. She noted the elderly man struggling with his bags near a blue car, the young couple laughing by the store entrance, and 2 men standing near a pickup truck a few rows over. Those 2 were talking, but their conversation didn't look friendly. One man, tall and thin, was waving his hands. The other, broader and heavier, had his arms crossed tight over his chest. Their voices were a low, angry rumble in the calm morning air. She noted it, the way you note a cloud that might bring rain, and then she turned her attention back to the cart. Her son was looking at the men too, his head tilted slightly. He had picked up her habits, this quiet boy. He felt the tension in the air, like a change in temperature. "All done?" she asked him, her voice soft. He nodded, holding up the last item, a box of his favorite crackers. She smiled, a small thing that made the careful lines of her face soften. "Good job. Let's go home." She pushed the cart towards their car, a simple, dark SUV. The boy walked ahead, pulling a small toy plane from his pocket, making it swoop through the air silently. As they reached the car, the angry voices from near the pickup truck suddenly got louder. "You never listen," the taller man shouted. "Don't tell me what to do." The broader man shot back. The woman kept her movements smooth and easy. She opened the back of the SUV, starting to lift the heavy bags of groceries inside. Her son stood near the back bumper, watching his plane, trying to block out the shouting. Her back was to the argument, but every muscle was aware of it. The sound of it was like a pebble thrown into the still pond of her morning dot. Then it happened. There was a sharp cry and the sound of a shove. The broader man, pushed hard by the taller one, stumbled backwards. He lost his balance, his feet scrambling on the asphalt, and crashed right into the boy. The boy let out a small gasp as the man's weight bumped him hard. The toy plane flew from his fingers, skittering under the car. For a second, everything was frozen. The boy looked down at his empty hands, then up at the huge, angry stranger who had knocked into him. The woman was already turning. She moved not with a startle, but with a swift, fluid motion. In an instant, she was between her son and the 2 men. She didn't shout. She didn't put her hands up. She just stood there, solid, like a tree that had suddenly grown from the pavement. "Hey," she said, and her voice wasn't loud, but it cut through the men's anger like a knife. It was flat, clear, and left no room for argument. "Watch where you're going. You hit my son." The broader man, red-faced from the shove and now from embarrassment, scowled at her. The taller one glared, his chest heaving. The woman didn't look away. She kept her eyes on them, her body angled slightly, one arm back, making sure her son was behind her. The boy peeked out from behind his mother's legs. He wasn't crying. His face was pale, but his eyes were fixed on the men, wide and unblinking. The broader man, humiliated in front of his friend, and this small, serious woman sneered. The kid was in the way. "Move along, lady. This isn't your business." "This is my son," she said, each word a stone dropped into water. "It is my business. Walk away. Now." The tall man laughed, a harsh, ugly sound. But the broad man, the one who had stumbled, felt his anger twist. This woman, this nobody, was telling him what to do. After his friend had shoved him, he needed to take his fury out on something, and she was right there, calm and unmovable, which made him even madder. His brain, fogged with rage, made a simple, stupid calculation. She was a woman, alone with a kid. She was mouthing off. He would shut her up and feel strong again. He stepped forward, his face dark. "You need to learn to keep your mouth shut," he growled, and then he swung. It wasn't a precise punch, but a wide, heavy arc of his fist. It connected with the side of her jaw with a terrible, wet sound. Her head snapped to the side from the force. A sharp, hot pain exploded in her face. She took a single, staggering step back to catch her balance, her boots scraping on the ground. For a second, the whole world went white and silent. Then the sound rushed back in. The traffic, the birds, the blood pounding in her own ears, and the sight of her son's face. He was staring at her, his eyes huge. Not with tears, but with a shock so deep it looked like he had stopped breathing. He was looking at his mother, who had just been hit, the one person in his world who was a constant, unshakable wall of safety. The woman slowly brought a hand up to her jaw. She worked it side to side, feeling the ache bloom deep in the bone. It hurt. It really hurt, but a different feeling was rising up in her now, pushing the pain into a small, distant box. It was a cold, clear feeling. It started in her stomach, a solid knot of ice, and spread out to her fingertips. The quiet mom who planned meals and pushed grocery carts was fading into the background. She turned her head and spat a small amount of red onto the gray asphalt. Then she lifted her eyes and looked straight at the man who had hit her. Her gray eyes were not scared. They were not even angry. They were empty, clean and clear and focused like two lenses. They were looking at him, but they were seeing things he could never understand: angles of attack, points of weakness, distances, exits. She was reading him like a page in a simple book. The boy saw the change in his mother. He saw her face go still, not with fear, but with a terrible calm. He saw her feet shift, just a little, settling into the ground. He saw her hands, now loose and open at her sides, and in a small, quiet voice that was not a child's whimper, but a clear statement, the boy spoke. "Stand down." "Mom." It was a phrase he had heard in the dark, whispered from her nightmares. A phrase he didn't fully understand, but he knew its meaning. It meant stop. It meant danger. The two men heard it. The tall one snorted, a mean grin on his face. "Yeah, listen to the kid, lady. Stand down." They didn't see what the boy saw. They just saw a woman who had been punched. A scared kid saying something funny. They didn't see the soldier who had just been called to duty. The sound of her son's voice, that small, serious command, cut through the fog of her rising instincts. "Stand down, Mom." For a long second, the only sounds were the distant hum of the store's coolers and a car rolling slowly past the parking lot entrance. The boy's words hung in the air. They were a lifeline thrown from her old life to this new, raw moment. He wasn't crying. He was observing. He was reminding her. She slowly turned her head to look at him. Her jaw ached fiercely, a hot, throbbing pulse with every heartbeat. She saw his face, pale but set. He was watching her, not the men. He was scared, but underneath the fear was a strange, focused trust. He had seen her have bad dreams. He had heard her wake up gasping in the dark. He knew a part of her lived in a world he didn't understand, and that part was now standing in the sunlight of a grocery store parking lot. Not her eyes met his, and she gave him a single, small nod. It said, "Asterisk, I see you. I'm here, Then she breathed out a long, steady stream of air and turned back to the two men. The man who had hit her was rubbing his knuckles, a smug, ugly look on his face. He thought he'd won. He thought that punch had settled everything. His friend, the tall one, stood a step behind, looking less sure now. He was watching the woman's face, and he didn't like what he saw. She wasn't crying. She wasn't cowering. She was just looking at them. "Leo," she said to her son, her voice different now. It was flat, clean, and absolutely clear, like ice. "Eyes on me. Just on me. Breathe in. Breathe out." She was doing it with him. A deep breath in through the nose, held for a second, released through the mouth. It was a drill. An anchor. The boy copied her, his small chest rising and falling. He locked his eyes on her profile, blocking out the two big, scary men. He held on to her voice. The woman kept her own eyes on the threat. The civilian part of her mind was still there, a quiet voice listing facts. Witnesses. Cameras on the light poles. Your son is here. Legal consequences. But that voice was being overridden by another one, an older, colder one. That voice was assessing. It was measuring the distance between her and the broad man, about 6 feet. It was noting the way he stood, his weight mostly on his back foot, leaving him unbalanced if pushed. It was seeing the car door open behind him, a hazard. It was watching the tall man's hands, seeing them clench and unclench, deciding if he would join in. The broad man misread her stillness for shock. "See?" he said to his friend, his voice loud and false. "You just gotta be firm." He took a step closer, pointing a thick finger at her. "Now, you and your kid are gonna get in your car, and you're gonna leave. And you're gonna be happy I let you go that easy." She didn't answer. Her face was a calm mask. The only sign of life was in her eyes, which tracked his every tiny movement, the twitch of his shoulder, the shift of his hips. He didn't like being ignored. The anger, which had cooled for a second, bubbled back up. "You deaf now, too?" he growled. He reached out, not to punch this time, but to grab the front of her shirt, to shake her, to make her pay attention to him. His hand moved through the air. That was the trigger. The moment his fingers were within reach, her left arm came up. It wasn't a dramatic swing. It was a sharp, precise motion, like a piston firing. Her forearm smashed into the inside of his wrist, knocking his grabbing hand off course. At the exact same time, her right hand shot forward, not in a fist, but with fingers stiff and straight. It wasn't aimed at his face or his body, but at the soft hollow at the base of his throat. She didn't strike it hard. She didn't need to. It was a tap, a punctuation mark. He made a noise that choked, surprised, oof, and stumbled back a step, his eyes bulging. He coughed, clutching at his neck. The shock on his face was complete. He hadn't seen it coming. It was too fast, too weird, too different from a street fight. His friend, the tall one, stared for one dumbfounded second. Then anger took over. "You crazy bitch!" he yelled, and he lunged at her, his arms wide, thinking he could just grab her and wrestle her down. He was slower than the first man, and she was ready. As he came in, she didn't back up. She stepped forward, inside the arc of his lunge. She turned her body sideways, making herself a smaller target. His right arm swung past her. As it did, her left hand clamped over his wrist like a vice. Her right arm snaked up and over his elbow, locking it. Then, using his own forward momentum against him, she dropped her weight and wrenched the locked arm downward, and around Dot it was a fluid, brutal dance. 1 second he was rushing her. The next, he was bent over at a painful angle, his own arm twisted up behind his back, her body leaning into him, driving him down. A sharp cry escaped his lips as his knees hit the asphalt. She kept the pressure steady, controlling him completely. He wasn't going anywhere. The whole thing, from the first block to the second man on his knees, had taken maybe 4 seconds. There was no big fight, no flying kicks, no shouting. It was quiet, efficient, and horrifyingly one-sided. The first man was still coughing, bent over near the open car door. He looked from his friend, who was whimpering on the ground, to the woman. She was looking right at him, her expression still empty of emotion. She hadn't even broken a sweat. "Stay," she said to him. The word was quiet, but it carried the weight of an order. He froze, one hand still on his throat. She then looked down at the man she was holding. "If I let go, you will sit on the curb. You will not move. Do you understand?" He nodded, his face pressed against the cool metal of the car door. She released the pressure slowly, ready to snap it back. When he was free, he scrambled awkwardly to the curb and sat, cradling his aching arm, not daring to look at her. The woman took 2 steps back, putting herself squarely between the men and her son. She was breathing a little faster now, but her hands were steady. She turned her head to check on the boy. He was still watching her, just as she told him to. His eyes were huge, but he was still breathing in that slow, deep rhythm she had shown him. In his small face, she saw a whirlwind of feelings: fear, yes, but also awe and confusion, and a dawning understanding that his mother was not like other mothers. She gave him the smallest, tightest smile. It was meant to be reassuring, but it probably looked as strange as it felt on her stinging face. "It's okay," she whispered to him. "Just keep breathing. It's almost over." And then she turned back to watch the 2 men, waiting for the next thing to happen, her body still humming with a quiet, dangerous energy. The parking lot felt different now. The air was charged. The ordinary morning was gone. Everyone was just waiting to see what this calm, terrifying woman would do next. The world came rushing back in, but it sounded different now. The woman could hear the distant beep, beep, beep of a truck reversing, the scuff of a shoe against the curb where the tall man sat, the quick, shallow breathing of the broad man still leaning against the car door. But underneath it all was a deep, ringing silence inside her own head. It was the silence of a job not quite finished. Her body was a tuned wire, humming with readiness. Every sense was dialed up to its highest point. She could feel the rough texture of the asphalt through the soles of her boots. She could smell the faint odor of gasoline and the sharp tang of the other man's fear sweat. Her eyes never stopped moving, flicking between the 2 men, checking the surroundings, and always glancing back to make sure her son was exactly where she had left him. He was. He stood by the open back of their SUV, his small hands gripping the bumper's edge. He was still following her order, his eyes locked on her. But his face had changed. The initial shock was fading, replaced by something more complicated. He watched the men, one rubbing his throat with a dazed expression, the other on the curb, cradling his arm, and then he looked back at his mother. There was a question in his eyes. Asterisk, who are you? Asterisk, she didn't have an answer for him. Not here. Not now. The broad man, the one who had thrown the punch, finally straightened up. The redness in his face had turned to a sickly gray. The bluster was gone, washed away by a cold dose of reality. He looked at his friend on the curb, who wouldn't meet his eyes. Then he looked at the woman. He swallowed hard, his Adam's apple bobbing. "Look," he started, his voice hoarse and scratchy. It was the voice of someone trying to find a way out of a room that had just locked shut. This got out of hand. We should all just go." The woman didn't speak. She just looked at him. Her silence was more frightening than any shout. He flinched under her gaze. "I'm sorry, okay?" The words came out in a rush, but they were empty. They weren't for her. They were for the situation. I shouldn't have touched you. Let's just forget it. Forget it. The words were so small, so silly. They hung in the air between the rows of parked cars. She thought about the sound his fist had made against her jaw. She thought about the look on her son's face in that split second after impact. Forget that? No, that was now a part of them, a memory etched into their morning. Sit, she said. Her voice was low, but it carried an undeniable command. She didn't point to the curb. She didn't need to. She just nodded toward the empty space next to his friend. He hesitated. His pride, what was left of it, fought a last, weak battle. But his body, which still remembered the strange, paralyzing tap to his throat, made the decision for him. He shuffled over and lowered himself heavily onto the curb, leaving a good foot of space between himself and his friend. Both men stared at the ground, looking like two scolded children, but the tension in their shoulders spoke of shame and simmering anger. The woman finally allowed herself a proper breath. She rolled her shoulders back, a slight, stiff movement. The adrenaline was starting to drain away, and the pain in her jaw was becoming a deep, insistent throb. She could taste a faint copper flavor in her mouth. She kept her hands loose, but she could feel a slight tremor starting in her fingertips, the body's after shock. She turned more fully toward her son. "Come here," she said, her voice softer now, but still not its normal tone. It was the voice she used when he had a nightmare, and she needed to pull him out of it. "Slowly, it's all right?" The boy let go of the bumper. He took a few careful steps toward her, his eyes flicking nervously to the men on the curb. When he was close, she put a hand on his shoulder. It was meant to be a grounding touch for him, but she realized she needed it, too. The solid feel of his small, warm shoulder under her palm was a tether to what was real, to what mattered. "Are you hurt?" she asked him, searching his face. He shook his head, no. He was looking up at her jaw, which was starting to show an ugly, red mark that would soon turn purple. "Your face," he whispered. "It's okay," she said. "It just stings a little." It was a lie, but a necessary one. "I need you to do one more thing for me. I need you to get my phone from the front seat. Can you do that?" He nodded, a serious little soldier accepting a mission. He scurried to the passenger door, opened it, and carefully lifted her plain black phone from the cup holder. He brought it back to her, holding it with both hands. "Thank you," she said. She took it, her movements deliberate. This was the next step. This was the part where the world of the parking lot met the world of rules and consequences. She didn't dial 911 right away. First, she opened the camera app. She turned her body and, without a word, took several clear pictures of the two men sitting on the curb. She took a picture of their pickup truck, getting the license plate. She took a picture of the spot on the ground near her car, though there was nothing to see there but asphalt. It was documentation. It was habit. The men watched her, their confusion growing. This wasn't normal. A normal person would be crying, or shouting, or already on the phone screaming for the police. This woman was methodical, calm, and cold. It scared them more than if she had pulled out a knife. Finally, she pressed the 3 numbers. She put the phone to her ear, her eyes never leaving the two men. When the operator answered, her voice was calm and utterly clear. "Yes, I need to report an assault in the parking lot of the supermart on Main Street. Yes, I am the victim. 2 men are still on the scene. No, I am not in immediate danger. They are detained. My son is with me. We are both safe." She gave the details in short, factual sentences. Her location. Descriptions of the men. What had happened. She sounded like she was reading a report. The operator asked if she needed an ambulance. She looked at her son, then at the men who were now whispering frantically to each other. "No," she said into the phone. "No ambulance. Just the police. Thank you." She hung up. The act of calling had shifted the atmosphere again. The waiting had a new shape to it now. It had a countdown. The broad man on the curb found his voice again, fear sharpening his words. "You didn't have to do that. We said we were sorry. This is just a misunderstanding." She finally spoke to him directly, her words like chips of ice. "You struck me in front of my child. There is no misunderstanding. You will explain it to the police." The finality in her voice silenced him. He looked from her to his friend, and a new, horrible thought seemed to dawn on his face. He was just starting to realize that he had not picked a fight with a random person. He had triggered something that followed rules he didn't know, that operated on a level he couldn't comprehend, and all he could do now was sit on the cold. Hard curb and wait for the sirens. Time stretched and bent in the quiet parking lot. It felt like hours, but it was only minutes. The woman stood, a still statue between her son and the two men on the curb. She didn't fidget. She didn't check her phone. She just watched. The boy stood close by her side, one small hand now holding onto the fabric of her pants leg. He was watching her, learning a new kind of quiet. The two men were not so still. The one who had been punched in the throat kept coughing, a dry, hacking sound. The other rubbed his shoulder, wincing. They whispered to each other, sharp, angry hisses that carried across the empty space. "This is your fault," the tall one muttered. "My fault? You shoved me." What was she? Some kind of cop? I don't know, but we're in for it now. Their bravado had leaked away, replaced by a jittery, sinking fear. They kept glancing toward the store entrance, hoping maybe no one had seen, hoping they could just melt away. But one look from the woman froze them in place. Her gaze said, clearly, "Try it." Then the sound. A distant warble, growing louder, cutting through the everyday noises of the town. Red and blue lights flashed against the store windows before the cars even came into view. The boy's grip on her leg tightened. She placed a reassuring hand on top of his head, her eyes still on the men. "It's just the police," she said softly, for his benefit. "They're here to help." Two squad cars pulled in, their tires crunching on the loose asphalt. They parked at an angle, blocking any easy escape. The doors opened, and two officers stepped out. They were calm, professional, their eyes taking in the scene with practiced speed. A woman and a child standing by an SUV. Two men sitting on a curb looking miserable. An open car door, no obvious weapons. The first officer, a man with a kind, tired face, approached her. His partner, a younger woman, hung back slightly, her hand resting lightly on her belt, watching the two men. "Ma'am," the first officer said, his voice neutral. "I'm Officer Miller. We got a call about an assault." "Are you the one who called?" "Yes," the woman said. Her voice was still that clear, unshaken tone. "I am. These two men assaulted me." The broad man on the curb jumped to his feet. "That's not what happened." He blurted out, "She attacked us. Look at my friend's arm. Look at my neck." Officer Miller held up a placating hand. "Sir, please sit back down. I'll get your statement in a moment." His eyes returned to the woman's face, noting the angry red mark blooming on her jawline. "Are you injured, ma'am? Do you need medical attention?" "I'm fine," she said. "My son is unharmed. Can you tell me what happened from the beginning?" She told it. It was the same report she had given on the phone. Short, clean, with no extra emotion. A dispute between the two men. One shoves the other. Her son is knocked down. She intervenes. One man strikes her in the face. She defended herself and restrained them until police arrived. While she spoke, the younger officer walked over to the two men. She listened as they tumbled over each other with their version. It was a mess of excuses. The kid was in the way. She was yelling. She came at them first. She was freakishly strong, like some martial arts maniac. Their story was full of holes, and their nervous energy made it sound even less believable. Officer Miller listened patiently to the woman. He nodded, writing in his small notebook. When she finished, he asked, "And you restrained both of them? By yourself?" "Yes," she said simply. He looked from her of average height, strong but not large to the two men, one of whom was quite big. A slight frown creased his forehead. It didn't add up, not in the way normal street fights added up. The men had minor complaints of pain. She had a visible, significant injury to her face, the kind that usually comes from being hit by a fist. Yet she was the one in control of the scene. "May I see some identification, ma'am?" He asked, "Of course." She turned to her son. "Can you get my wallet from the center console?" The boy nodded, eager to help, and fetched her simple black wallet. She handed over her driver's license. Officer Miller studied it, copied down the information. As he went to hand it back, something seemed to occur to him. The calm under pressure, the technical description of the restraint, the sheer, unnatural control of the situation. "Ma'am," he said, his tone shifting just a little, becoming more deliberate. "Do you have any other form of ID?" "Military ID, perhaps." The question hung in the air. The boy looked up at his mother. The two men on the curb, who were being questioned by the other officer, fell silent, straining to hear. The woman looked at Officer Miller for a long moment. Then she gave a single small nod. She took the wallet back, opened a different compartment, and pulled out another card. It was well worn, the edges soft. She handed it to him. Officer Miller took it. He looked down. His eyes moved across the card, and then stopped. Everything about his posture changed. His shoulders straightened just a bit. He blinked, looked from the card to her face, then back to the card. A slow breath escaped him. He turned and caught his partner's eye. He gave a small, almost imperceptible jerk of his head. The younger officer, picking up on his changed energy, excused herself from the two men and walked over. Officer Miller didn't say a word. He just handed her the ID. The younger officer looked at it. Her eyebrows shot up toward her hairline. She read it twice, then looked at the woman with a whole new expression, a mix of shock, respect, and sudden, crystal-clear understanding. The broad man, sensing the shift, called out, his voice tinged with a new panic. "What? What is it? Is she a cop?" Officer Miller walked over to the curb, the worn ID card still in his hand. He looked down at the two men, and his kind face was now stern, almost pitying. "No," he said, his voice low so only they could hear. "She's not a cop." He paused, letting the word hang. "You just assaulted a retired Navy SEAL." The words didn't seem to make sense to them at first. They just stared. Navy SEAL. The term floated in the air, something from movies and news clips, not from a Tuesday morning grocery run. Then it crashed down. The speed. The strange, painful moves that didn't feel like fighting. The absolute fearlessness. The cold, empty look in her eyes. The color drained completely from the broad man's face. He looked like he might be sick. All the fight, all the bluster, evaporated, leaving behind pure, cold dread. He wasn't just in trouble with the law. He had made a personal, profound mistake of epic proportions. He had tried to bully someone who had been trained to handle far worse than a parking lot argument. Officer Miller turned his back on them, a clear dismissal. He walked back to the woman, handing her ID card back with a new level of deference. "Lieutenant," he said, the title coming naturally to his lips. I think we have a very clear picture of what happened here. For the first time since the punch landed, the woman's rigid composure softened, just a crack. It wasn't a smile. It was a slight release of tension in her shoulders. She was just a mom again, tired and in pain, with a confused little boy holding on to her. "Thank you, officer," she said. And she meant it. The ride to the police station was quiet. The boy sat in the back of the squad car, his nose almost pressed to the window, watching the familiar town pass by in a blur. He had never been in a police car before. His mother sat beside him, one arm around his shoulders, her other hand holding an ice pack from the officer's against her jaw. The cold felt good on the hot, throbbing skin out at the station. Things were calm and slow. They were led into a small, quiet room with a table and a few chairs. Not the scary rooms you see on TV. An officer brought the boy a can of soda and a coloring book with some crayons. He took them politely, but didn't open them. He just watched his mother talk to Officer Miller and a detective. She told the story again, the same clear, short version. The detective, a serious-looking woman, listened and took notes. Sometimes she asked a question. "And after he hit you, what did you do next?" The mother would answer, "I secured the threat and moved my son to safety." The detective would just nod, writing down the words. They weren't treating her like a victim. They were treating her like a professional who had filed a report. After a while, Officer Miller came back in. He crouched down to the boy's level, which made the boy shrink back a little into his mother's side. "Hey, buddy," Officer Miller said, his voice gentle. "I just need to ask you a couple questions, okay? Is that all right?" The boy looked up at his mother. She gave a small, encouraging nod. "You can tell the officer what you saw," she said. "Just the truth." So the boy did. In his small, soft voice, he told about the men yelling, about getting knocked down and losing his plane, about the loud sound the man's fist made on his mother's face. He didn't cry. He stated facts. When asked what his mom did after, he said, "She made them sit down." He didn't describe the moves. He just knew that 1 minute the men were standing, and the next they were sitting on the curb, not moving. Officer Miller thanked him and gave him a sticker, a shiny badge that said, "Junior Officer." The boy held it in his hand, staring at it. Later, they sat in the quiet room alone, waiting. The coloring book was still unopened. The boy finally spoke, his voice a whisper. "Mom?" "Yes, sweetheart? Are you a superhero?" The question was so earnest, so caught between a child's wonder and a child's fear, that it almost broke her heart. She put the ice pack down and turned to face him fully. She took both of his small hands in hers. They were cold from holding the soda can. "No," she said, looking straight into his eyes. "I'm not a superhero. I'm just your mom. A long time ago, before you were born, I had a different job. A job where I learned how to stay very calm when things are scary and how to protect people. That's all. Those skills? They're just a part of me, like knowing how to make your favorite pancakes." He thought about this. The man called you a seal. Like at the aquarium? A faint, real smile touched her lips, though it pulled at her sore jaw. "Not that kind of seal. It's just a name for the job I had. It doesn't matter right now. What matters is that you're safe. I'm safe. And we're together." He leaned against her, his head resting on her arm. They sat like that for a long time. Asterisk, 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 back at the parking lot. The story had already begun to grow. The elderly man who had seen the shove told his wife. The young couple by the entrance had glimpsed the quick, confusing takedown. A store employee on a smoke break had heard the sirens and asked a cop what happened. Whispers traveled. Asterisk, did you hear? Two guys picked a fight with a woman over by the SUVs. Then she took them both down, just like that. And finally, the detail that turned it from a rumor into a local legend, passed from the younger officer to a friend on the force. Asterisk, turns out she's former Special Forces. Navy SEAL. No joke. Asterisk, by the time a friend came to the station to drive the woman and her son home, the air in their small town felt different. When they stopped at the pharmacy to pick up pain medication, the clerk behind the counter, a man who usually just scanned items without looking up, gave her a long, careful look, then nodded with deep respect. "Hope you're feeling better, Mom," he said, his voice quieter than usual. At home, in the safety of their own kitchen, the normal world tried to reassert itself. She put the groceries away, one by one. The milk in the fridge, the crackers in the pantry. The boy put his toy plane, recovered from under the car by a helpful officer, on the kitchen table. It felt like a relic from a different day. That night, after his bath and his story, as she tucked him into bed, he asked the question she'd been waiting for. "Mom, when he hit you, were you scared?" She sat on the edge of his bed, the dim light from the hallway casting a soft glow on his worried face. She thought about the cold flood of adrenaline, the hyperclarity, the total absence of fear in that moment. But that wasn't the truth he was asking for. "Yes," she whispered, brushing his hair from his forehead. "I was scared, but not for me. I was only ever scared for you. My only job in that whole parking lot was to make sure you were okay. Everything else was just steps to make that happen." He seemed to accept this. It was a reason he could understand. A mother's love was a power even bigger than the other kind he had seen that day. "I love you." "Mom," he said, his eyelids getting heavy. "I love you more than anything in this world," she replied. And she kissed his forehead. She walked out, leaving his door open a crack. In the living room, she sat in the dark, listening to the peaceful sound of his breathing from the monitor. Her face ached. Her body felt tired down to its bones. Outside, the town buzzed with the story of the Navy SEAL mom. But inside this quiet house, there was no legend. There was just a woman, a mother, who had done what she had to do. The uniform was put away for good. The war was over. But the love and the will to protect what was hers, that was a service from which she would never retire. And that, she knew, was the only part of the story that truly mattered.